So ours is a Welsh-based charity, and we have about 150 projects up and down Wales, supporting, children's services right up to prison release. And my specific job role now is I'm the strategic lead for gambling and other harms, but I'm also the registered manager at our 16-bed rehab. And how I've come into the gambling space is we won a contract about 4.5 years ago to support people with complex needs and gambling harms. So people that don't fit on any particular waiting list, mental health, drug and alcohol, and then also have the gambling harms, to pilot a treatment pathway. And here we are 4.5 years in. Obviously, we're going into a new commissioning levy, but we've had some really, really good successes. We were never sure how many people we would get or need to treat. But referrals have been consistent. We get about 40 to 50 inquiries a quarter to the treatment pathway.
So in terms of your the age range of your clientele, what is the range and when they do decide to come to you?
It varies really. We take over 18s, but the oldest we've had on the pathway I think has been about 65. So it varies, and sometimes the gambling has been entrenched for 20 years before they've even thought, I need to do something about this, or there is a life-changing event that's happened, the wife's finally found out, or the police are involved, or there's criminality, or they just get to a point where I just can't keep living like this. I find them the most resourceful of the clientele, because if you think about payday comes in, money's gone, and for the rest of the month they're quite resourceful, I say. But yeah, it varies, does vary in age. And when your brain's still developing at 25, it is sometimes really difficult.
How truly big is the problem of gambling addiction in the UK? You have all these companies saying, well, we're working with so-and-so, we're trying to do this with ourselves. But for organisations like yourself who have to deal with not just someone with gambling addiction, but things in their own personal lives on top of that, what's the true scope of gambling addiction in the UK?
From my perspective, and this is going to be probably, you're going to think, oh, okay, yes, there is an element. The house always wins. They're programmed, they're designed. My nephew is a design program. He designs it. I know that if you get a fruit machine in your pub, let's just say you've got a pub, they can be set a specific way so that you will always, get some profit from it. So I know that there is that, but equally from our perspective as well, there has to be an element of personal responsibility, because if you don't have an element of personal responsibility, then you will always look to blame someone else. So that's where the fine balance is. We would never say, and yes, because we've got drink responsibly, when the fun stops. I know that was a little bit, because if people could stop an addiction, they would stop an addiction. That's what got to be factored in as well. At the end of the day, the dopamine, you look at, what somebody's brain looks like between the reward pathways. If they could stop, they would. They can't, and that's the bit that we've I don't think we've got the true prevalence of what it is, because when you're looking at the problem gambling severity index, anybody over a score of 8 needs to access. But what about people who score 7? Who goes back and checks them in 6 months' time, or 12 months' time, or why do they, so I don't think we'll ever know the true prevalence. We do know that less than 2% of people actually access treatment and support. That I don't know, you might have already heard that stat, but we do know that there's people out there that don't reach out for help and support due to the stigmatisation around gambling and, what do you mean you gamble? Why can't you stop? It's just a fun thing, but it's not fun when it overtakes your life, is it?
No,
I hope that helps.
No, that's absolutely fantastic. Any piece of information you give is completely invaluable. Is absolutely fantastic.
Okay.
I truly do appreciate it. I was having a conversation with, oddly enough, I do work in a pub, and I was talking to one of my colleagues who's now left, and he was talking about his own problem with addiction in terms of gambling, and how he's decided to try and mediate it for himself, or try and almost bring himself down on it. He does still gamble, but it's not the vast amounts he used to. He's now doing on his pennies that he's doing now. The only way I could equate it is to some of maybe this is very loose, so please stop me if you can. In terms of some of the drug addiction, rather than to bring them off it, they'll be put on methadone and things of that nature. So that's how he's trying to wean himself off ever so slowly, is to decrease the frequency and decrease the amounts. He's not comfortable with the situation, but he's trying to make it less damaging in a way. That's an example that I've been given. So in terms of you hearing that, what would you say what's your first reaction from that?
My first reaction would be, he doesn't have to do it on his own. And there is lots of organisations out there that could help. And yes, whatever is, but what we do here is they literally go from being able to gamble today to having all the blockers on their phone straight away. So as soon as they come into the rehab or into the detox unit, the blockers are put on their phone. They get a selection as to which ones they want to put on. And again, I get that's going to be gambling specific, isn't it? You look at the smartphones now, it's a casino in your pocket. So you need to go through the talk, ban, stop to be able to stop. Then obviously the GAM ban, which stops you from going on all of the sites, and the stop, all of the kind of like literature coming through your emails and everything. There is always way round things, but he's still leaving himself open, isn't he? And again, my other advice for him would be, if he's got underlying issues around what's projected him for gambling to become a coping mechanism, a maladaptive coping mechanism, there is the chance of cross addiction.
I don't expect you to provide names, obviously, because of data protection, but are there any any examples, maybe people that are happy to disclose, obviously no names, no ages, but do you have any examples for me that where people have talked about this situation, or how like a small story of someone? Do you have any examples?
So we've had somebody in that they're a professional gambler, and again, they talk about the chance, and I can predict how the cards are going to go, but then when we hit them with gambler's fallacy, and then we say to them, well, they build it on chance. We've had a few people in that have said that they feel they fall into the realms of professional gambling, and that they want to go back potentially to doing that. I know a gentleman that I work with, partners with, he was a professional gambler and used to do quite well off it, and that's the thing as well, isn't it? When you're doing quite well off something, there is this kind of like, well, I'm earning far more there than I would. It's not legitimate, because it is legitimate. Gambling, you're allowed to gamble, aren't you? It's a legal entity. But yeah, he's come away from that, taken a massive pay cut to work with a gambling organisation, and speaks about his experiences of putting these professional poker tables on together and things. But then people losing their houses, and that is that, putting the keys to the houses in and the families not knowing that they've just gambled their house away. And then we've also got to look at the criminality. Morally right people who then resort to criminality because of their gambling, something that they wouldn't have normally even thought about doing. We've had people that have stolen from their employer £500,000. Their family didn't know till the police knocked the door. And the family were arrested because they thought that actually they must have been living a lavish lifestyle, and they must have had benefit from this £500,000, but actually they didn't, because it'd all gone on gambling. A lady I was speaking to yesterday had 2,500 different transactions going in and out of her bank over a period of time, and the bank never stopped it. But each transaction going into her bank was a transaction going from her employee's account. So do I think enough's being done? It's going in the right direction. I'll say that for myself. What would I like to see more? I would like to see the gambling ads stopped, or at least pushed to after the watershed, and not so readily available that we're priming kids at a very, very young age.
With the current preventions, are they rather reactive to, you know, cases that get put in front of them, or do you think someone's actually being proactive just in terms of future prevention? Is it more what we'll deal with when we're given it, or is it more let's protect us from this happening in the first place?
I think as it's coming into a public health approach, then yes, prevention is better than a cure, isn't it? But also as well, that people might not necessarily, it needs to start at a young age. And I think that's the, you know, when we look at financial resilience, so, you know, do kids understand what it means to get a payday loan? Do kids understand what it means to have Klarna, you know, when they hit 18 and things like that? You know, instant gratification, isn't it? That's the world we're living in at the minute. So yeah, that's where I think prevention is on. It's always been there, but because we're now talking about gambling, we never knew it was there. We never knew these companies were doing these things. Not companies, like charities and stuff. Like, you know, there's some that work within the National Gambling Support Network, which we're part of, have always been doing the prevention side of it. We just might not have known that they were doing it until more and more people come forward. And, you know, people have started writing books, haven't they? So you read the books and then it's like, oh, right, this is a bit of a hot topic here, isn't it? So yeah, it's always been there, and I think it has its place, but it needs to adapt. So what might be a preventative measure today might not be the same tomorrow, because we've always got to be around crypto and what's coming over the hill, because we shut one avenue down and we just need to be around, because obviously, you know, YouTube and that. So again, obviously you're aware, kids can log into YouTube and watch people bet. And they think that they're getting this famous YouTuber, and he's betting, but he's not betting with his own money. The casino are supporting this, you know, but in our ideal instant gratification world that the kids want something there and now, they think that this is the norm. You know, Drake doing his launch of his last album in a casino, you know, come on.